You are listening to Pub Royalty Queen Podcast, a place to empower women of color in the music business.
Welcome to another episode of Pub Royalty Queen Podcast. This is your host, Janisha Jones, back with another special guest. Today we have Drea Jackson. Drea is manager of artist and label relations at Soundcloud, where she works with some of today's hottest artists. I have had the pleasure of connecting with Drea as we're both activists for women of color in the music industry. She just exudes big boss energy, so I knew I had to have her on the show. So without further ado, welcome Drea to Pub Royalty Queen Podcast. How you feeling, girl?
Good. Thank you for having me, Janisha. I'm like, the energy you're giving is great. It's been a long day, but I got to get cute for this, and I get to talk to my girls about the things that we go through and how to help other women get through it too.
Yes, and this is exactly that, an opportunity for us to kind of build camaraderie and to understand that we're all in this together. We're in a very small group of people in the music business, but we can lean on each other for support and encouragement. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. Why don't you tell us about your journey in the music industry and how you became manager of artist and label relations at SoundCloud?
My journey is actually very interesting. Well, you know what? I'm gonna stop saying that because I've learned from anyone in this industry that we all have a journey that did not start anywhere near where we ended up at or where we're at now. But I actually was always really strong in math and like science in school. So I was a math major in college, really strong in math in like grade school. Went in thinking I was gonna be an engineer or a scientist, kind of like my dad and my brothers. But I didn't. I love math. I was good at it, but it wasn't for me. So I switched my major to econ and thought I was gonna go the business route. Thought I was gonna be this big businesswoman. At one point, I thought maybe I might be like, an entertainment attorney, but I realized very quickly I was not the most rigorous academic person ever. And that I think a bulk of my talent came from just my ideas and my understanding of people and just consumer demand. So this little econ, right? So I graduated and I did an internship actually in advertising at Ogilvy and Mather in account management, and you get exposure to all the different arms. So I kind of lean towards more of the like empirical ones, like media coordinating and media buying and social media marketing or digital marketing coordinators, things like that. Ended up working in corporate retail in those avenues for a few different retailers, Home Depot being one based in Atlanta. But all while I'm doing this post-grad, I'm working as a bartender and a waitress in Atlanta, nightlife, and I ended up meeting someone by the name of Candace Daniels, and she saw a light in me and was like, you should be a host for my media outlet and my media platform. And I'm like, cool, I get to get into all events now, I get to talk to people, I get to do this. I love music already, and I was trying to figure out what my brand could be in entertainment. So it was like, okay, I could be a media corresponding. So that's kind of what I was doing all while I was doing my Home Depot / other media or other cars at Carter's at one point, like other corporate retail jobs. Then one day, Home Depot just got too real. And it actually happened around when Trump got elected. And I just looked around in my cubicles. I'm like, I don't feel right in here.
Yeah.
And let me get up and just quit my job. And I did. Let me just bargain. And like, I didn't just walk out. I gave him a little notice, but I just had this epiphany that was like, why don't I just work at a company that at least has music at it and makes it? There was one thing that was said to me at one point too, during that same week that really ticked it off when I had my headphones in, and the Home Depot corporate office is pretty big, right? It's a big facility. But I have my headphones in, and one of the old heads there, I don't want to call her older, but one of the old heads said, hey, like, I don't want to see you with headphones on. That's not professional. And I'm in my mind like, girl, I can't breathe without music. What do you mean? So that's when I knew.
Moment.
Right. Between that and between Trump, I was like, what? Then lo and behold, Pandora Media ended up like kind of expanding their headquarters to Atlanta to have kind of like an HQ too. And I was like, I worked in like customer or account management at Ogilvy, and I worked in consumer relations before and things like that. Let me go work in the sales and CS, customer success at Pandora. And that's when, I know it's a long story, but hold on, it's gonna get really good. That's when I got to Pandora. But like at Pandora, I had an amazing leader. Shout out to Harmaku Williams. Brian Calhoun was over there, and J1, Joshua Rayford, J1, we gotta call him J1. They are very instrumental in kind of helping me bring some of my talent over to some of the things that the music team was doing at Pandora. So doing my day job with Pandora and in customer success and kind of the sales side, but then also the director of music marketing over there at the time, Brian Calhoun, and then the head of programming or hip hop programming, J1, they wanted to start bringing artists in for interviews and for like conversations in the office and having industry and things like that. And I'm like, that's totally up my alley. So I kind of started doing artist relations for them. It took me under their wing. I was working very closely with the artists and kind of sitting in those meetings where they're going through the best practices and going through their numbers and going through like just different ideas for how to use the platform. And then the sales org of SoundCloud and the sales org of Pandora ended up doing some like partnership that I won't go into detail on, but long story short, Pandora sells SoundCloud's advertising inventory. So they needed to communicate with SoundCloud routinely to strategize on how to sell that particular inventory. And that's when I was like, I'm going to go work at SoundCloud. Okay, wow, I can literally email them right now and they're going to know who I am because they're at Pandora. Awesome. So I ended up making connections over at SoundCloud. But let me tell you how divine this is. I literally had a music blog, and like my whole brand at the time, Drea Vibes, was based on shit I found on SoundCloud. And I don't know if I can curse here.
Wow.
That was like the name of it. Drea Vibes,
Found
shit I found on SoundCloud. I was obsessed with SoundCloud since like college. So like most of my love for music came from how I was digging through it. So then meeting Candace, being in those scenes, and then kind of being kind of on the ground with a lot of artists who are huge now that were a little bit smaller back then. But like I just kind of innately was on this path. J1, Brian, and Koo really, really set it off for me. And then I ended up moving to New York after I got the SoundCloud job in brand partnership strategy. So I went from sales, customer success, to brand partnership strategy, because I was like, if you're going to be selling these custom events on the behalf of this culture, I need to be in those rooms and I need to be telling that story. That's how I got the job. Then at SoundCloud, I was doing that. Great, wonderful, woo, amazing. Had a blast there, learned a lot. But I was on Clouds of Color as an anchor. My co-anchor at the time, AC, Albert Cook, happened to be the man whose role I am now sitting in now. So he and I would like organize, and Clouds of Color is a DRG for people of color at SoundCloud.
We need more of those.
Yeah, diversity resource group. A lot of companies had those. I was actually on the one mixtape at Pandora as well, and was one of the leaders as well. But leading Clouds of Color kind of gave me an outlet to throw other artists facing events and parties and things like that would kind of like be more of a cultural moment. And then Erica Montez, who was my former boss, AC's boss at the time, obviously, but like I think she and I just clicked because she kind of saw the light in me and she saw that I was doing a lot for artists. There was one thing I hosted that was for a compilation album that we did with I Am Mother. And we had the artists kind of get in there and get involved with it. And I'm interviewing the artists and I'm talking to them. And then I think that was when a lot of people at SoundCloud realized like, oh, Drea, she knows how to interface with artists. She has those skills and she has relationships. And it's not something I kind of flaunted before that, because I was like, well, I'm at SoundCloud now. I'm just gonna figure it out. Then I get to SoundCloud, then I'm in artist relations, and now I'm sitting here, and Erica's not at the company anymore, but she literally was instrumental in just guiding me through this and giving me that shot, not knowing what my Rolodex really looked like, just knowing I was somebody that knew people and knew how to talk to people.
Shout out to Erica. She's an amazing woman, and she's coming from the Def Jam camp. So she's an OG in the game and just amazing resource in general to have. She's also a new friend of mine as well. So shout out to Erica. I know she's watching this.
Yes, of course she is. She better be. So she kind of like took me under her wing, and I've been soaring ever since. It's a journey, right? But like there's some sweet spots and some little not so sweet parts of being in this industry as a Black woman. I think we're gonna get into that the rest of the conversation.
Yes, but I love that you already touched on the mentorship aspect of it too, and being lifted from many different people. Mentorship is such a huge, first of all, it affects the bottom line. So I'm a data researcher, and one of the things that I've learned in conducting a research analysis on intersectionality in the music industry is that mentorship actually increases your bottom line by $40,000 over the span of your career. So if you don't have someone that's going to see your strengths and your weaknesses and lift you in the places that you need those opportunities, it can really affect how much you take home at the end of the day. And so unfortunately, we work in an industry that is obviously male dominated, but people also tend to hire people that look like them or remind them of themselves. So if you don't have more of these people of color in those executive roles to lift other people up that look like them, then they also just don't get afforded those opportunities for promotion and to advocate for themselves and each other. So shout out to the people out there that see the potential in us and offer us the opportunity to advance by saying our names in those rooms that we might not be in, but then also just being a listening to hear where we are and to assess where we need to go. So you were about to allude to some of the challenges that women of color face in the music industry. Can you describe for us one specific challenge that you've had to overcome?
I've had to overcome the challenge of being, honestly, women of color is, the color part is just another added on part. Like, but being a woman in general, I more particularly interface with hip hop talent and a lot of the management that comes along with those camps. And a lot of times they're men, but there's a lot of white men in those spaces, actually, more than what I thought when I first got into this. I won't say the politics, but just the different communication styles and the different etiquettes and the codes in which that we talk to each other. It can be tricky, like it's one thing for me to be a little bit of, the stand on my ground, let me tell you who you're talking to type, versus like the etiquette of artist relations and having to make sure you manage that relationship no matter what you could or couldn't get for that particular artist, right? I don't have any like actual details that I would get into, but the way I would put it is that, imagine that you're a butterfly and no matter what, you got to still flutter those wings. As soon as your wings get shocked because you may have got your feelings hurt, you may have said something a little too much, then that's when you start to sink and that's when you're most vulnerable. And so understanding artist relations, that you got to keep that flutter, you got to keep it flying, you got to keep it on that path, because as soon as you start trying to get a little spicier in certain ways, that could deter some things. And I'm really good at maintaining. It's just a matter of like dealing with what it feels like on the inside to have to swallow some of those bullets or bite that grit your teeth in some of those moments and hold some of those things in. That's the part that I've learned that I have to kind of like literally digest and not digest, that take in and then regurgitate right back out. And I've learned on my own spiritual journey, I hate saying this, but as I vibrate higher, literally, there's just certain things that I just can't even like let go through that wavelength anymore. It's just like, get away. I won't even let it sink in. Now, do I know how to deal with it? Yes. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and harp on it.
And I love that. Yes, there's an aspect to it where it's like, just don't take everything personal. To listen to some of the constructive feedback, but then if it's not constructive as well, to learn how to use it as fuel to build who you need to be and to become more clear on what it is that you bring to the table and what you want, and to present that in a way that you said is digestible for people, because unfortunately this is a white male dominated industry and they're not going to understand how we're expressing it. So
right. But you made me think of something, because like understanding what I bring to the table, I don't question what anyone that's in the rooms that I'm in bring to the table. I automatically know they're bringing something to the table because we're in the room. And I get a little frustrated sometimes because I'm like, there's no way that you don't see that the reason that I'm sitting in this role, there's so many of these roles in so many of these companies, right, is for a reason. I should be as respected as what is respect yourself, because you're here, I'm here. I would be at McDonald's if there was a reason for you to be talking to me like that. And honestly, there's no reason to talk to anybody like that. No shade to it. But you know what I mean? And so I just kind of look around like,
you are.
I'm not asking you questions about why you manage this artist or why this is that or why, you're in this particular role at a company.
Exactly.
Why are there questions about me? We all had to get through something to get here. And you heard my journey.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that is the part that is a little bit disheartening too, is when you put in the work and that you're sometimes even more qualified than the next person to do the job. And then you're always being questioned or having to over assert yourself to get the same level of respect that someone just off the street could come in and receive automatically. It's kind of like discouraging, but we have to be able to stand up for what it is that we know we do bring to the table, to your point. So I'm glad that we're all young in this game still, and there's a lot for us to learn, but at least we've gotten that down,
Yeah.
So what would you say was your mama, I made it moment where you realized you were headed in the right direction, and what characteristics do you attribute to having reached that point?
Oh, that's a great question. I still feel like I haven't had a mama I made at that moment. And that might be just me being a Black woman that's been oppressed through so much trauma so long. I haven't felt like I made anywhere. Even when I graduated from Spelman, it felt like weird because I was like, oh shit, I graduated. Now what else I gotta achieve? I gotta achieve something else now. I don't know what that looks like yet, right? Went on this journey, I'm in arts relations. But I will say one of the moments where I realized I manifested and really kind of hit a very like divine intersection was when I hosted the first SoundCloud creator forum. I hosted the panel discussion portion and moderated the panels. And being someone who loves SoundCloud so much, literally had a whole blog about it and like was creating my own videos and entertainment personality on the side, but corporate day job in the one time. But then I finally got this big job in the city working in New York. I started in August of 2019. The creator forum was October of 2019. AC, Albert Cook, was the one who saw that, okay, let's have Drea host it. She's someone that is obviously capable and qualified. He gave me the opportunity to do that. And I mean, to be honest, coming in 2 months into SoundCloud and getting that opportunity to be that facing the front of the company is huge. Now that I think about it, that was huge for him to do. But I was so confident I was going to kill it. And I did. But being on that stage at that moment, I'm like looking around with the mic in my hand and I'm representing SoundCloud and I'm able to actually like get paid for this. And not that I was even getting paid for doing that, because I just did it because honestly, like I'm sure the budget wasn't that big during then either. So I just happened to be someone who had the capability of doing that. And it just kind of was a culminating moment. It was such a moment that like, I think the word is culminating. I'm not trying to use too many big words and not say it the right way, but it was just one of those moments where I'm like, wow, I work at SoundCloud now. I'm a brand partnership strategist. You know, I'm making this much money living in New York City, and someone believed in me enough to put me on the stage. And at the time, Erica didn't even know me yet. And she was the one who essentially had the say over stuff. But after I did what I had to do on that stage that day, it pretty much set the tone for the rest of my career at SoundCloud. And I remember being so nervous, but it was in Atlanta, and that was where I lived at 10 years before I left. And I just got on the stage and I'm just like, does anybody know what A3C stands for? And I just let it go from there. That's when I just felt comfortable. I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yes. I mean, that's such a major thing. Like, and to your point, yes, I don't think that women of color really get an opportunity to sit down with their accomplishments, because this business is so much of, okay, I'm done with this project. What's the next project? It's like competing against yourself and then also competing against the next person who knows how competitive this business is and is trying just as hard as you are, you know. So congratulations on the success that you've had so far. And this is also an opportunity to give each other our flowers, because we don't really, like I said, get a chance to acknowledge those things and the hard work and all the sacrifice that goes into getting where we need to be. So congratulations. And I just want to give you your, flowers now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. When I read that question as part of a briefing for this, I was like, shit, like, I don't really know what to put. I have never felt the triumph that I deserve to feel and bask in. And I hope one day that happens. Well, it'll happen one day. I hope one day I'm able to receive it and really sit in it.
That's such a tough thing, because honestly, like, this is a very hard business to make it in and sustain in. I mean, I'm a data researcher, so I always go back to the numbers when I talk about these things. But just
I'm a numbers girl too. I feel you.
So just to enter into the business, women of color, we're the most educated, but we aren't coming from a place of privilege where we can just afford to go to college without taking on student loan debt. And then the industries are in these major metropolitan areas that are very expensive to live in. And then we're entering into the industry via internship, and most of the time unpaid internships. So you're already entering on an uneven playing field to begin with. Your student loan debt, unpaid internship, major metropolitan areas. Like, the fact that you're having to overcome all these other challenges and then still be able to sustain in this business is actually pretty monumental. And we need to be able to sit with that and say, yes, we are here. We worked our way up and we deserve to be here. That's the other thing too, is like there's this gaslighting effect that always happens when we don't get the acknowledgement and the appreciation. It's like, did I really earn that? Do I really deserve that? It's like, yes, we did deserve it.
We do.
You know what I mean? So major buyers, I appreciate you for sharing your experience in that way. So what advice would you give women of color in the music industry?
I would say stand your ground with grace. That's all I can say. Grace is the biggest part, though. And when I say grace, giving yourself grace, but also just eloquence grace. Because there's something to say about me speaking to someone in the tone in which that it doesn't, in which it can penetrate, but it doesn't harm.
Right.
And getting your point across in that medium versus floating around outside of the energy that really matters,
Amazing.
No matter what, we're gonna have to be in those moments where we have to stand our ground with grace. There's never gonna be a way that you can't avoid it. You're not gonna avoid it. You may be able to get through a lot of the industry without having to deal with that, but even the higher you get, it gets even worse. So going into the industry, understanding that you're gonna be faced with some battles and some challenges in which you're gonna be tasked to communicate in a way that keeps you safe, keeps everyone else around you in respect of what you have to say, or in, I guess, receiving what you have to say and respecting what you have to say, and covers your ass, essentially.
CYA, absolutely. Yes, documents everything. I think we're some of the most diligent when it comes to making sure that when the buck falls back on us, that we know who's held accountable for what. Yes, if I'm managing this project, I'm doing everything I can to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, because I know at the end of the day, I'm going to get much more of the pushback and the resistance when it comes to having to express that, I'm taking ownership of this thing. Now, where's everybody else in their ownership and what they contributed to this?
I'd say another piece of advice I would give women of color is just to remain confident, even if you have to fake it. Like sometimes I have to go back to that Rihanna video or Rihanna interview where she was like, if I'm not feeling it, I fake it. There's been moments where I've cracked, and you can hear it in my tone, or where you can hear, a little bit of my vulnerability because I'm frustrated and I don't like having to take in what I'm taking in. And it's messing up my thoughts and it's messing up my communication. And I know that my communication is the most valuable thing because I have to essentially teach people how to respect me all times. But maintaining your confidence will kind of give you that air that lets you at least safely float on those words. And floating on those words is the best thing you can do, because honestly, if you think about it, that's really what executives and leaders end up pretty much getting their whole careers off on, is floating on words and maintaining influence. And that's all confidence.
Amen. Those are bars right now. She just dropped some bars on
you. For real. I'm taking my advice as I'm talking to you.
Yes. So if there was one thing that you could have done differently in regards to pursuing your career, what would it have been?
The first thing I would have done differently is maintain my personal brand, especially as I mentioned before, I had my own Drea Vibes blog / my take on everything in the intersection of music and tech and pop culture. So I had a conversation going from my voice and from my POV at all times, but I stopped it because I kind of thought that, okay, I work in music now. I finally got a paycheck for it. And it's actually it's a good one. So maybe I don't have to do this entertainment stuff anymore. But realizing I have a really good gift and talent in that side. And I kind of diminished it a little bit by, I don't want to say selling myself to a company, but selling myself in too far into a company and losing a little bit of my esteem and my glory, right? So I would have maintained that. And then I also would have started therapy sooner, because as you grow in your career, as you grow in a gift and on a path that is very divinely laid out, it's inevitable that you're going to feel imposter syndrome, because it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel right. So I would have started therapy sooner. So I would have had a clearer guidance on or at least things to workshop on my own, in terms of when I have those moments where I'm not feeling confident or where the imposter syndrome is kicking my behind. And in turn, I would have had a lot better time management, I would say. And time management is so important in this industry, because you have literally your personal life and you have work, and they're this close together. So when you're missing that time, it's eating away at you at one of those ends, and it's not healthy. But yeah.
I hear that. Ooh, imposter syndrome is such a main topic that we discuss here as a key, because I don't feel like there are other groups of people that feel it as impactfully the way that women of color do. Like I said, we don't necessarily get the recognition that we deserve just naturally for doing a good job of going above and beyond. It's actually more or less expected of us. So when we do, meet our own expectations or go beyond expectations, it feels like, okay, well, that's what I'm supposed to do.
And then to your point, to be able to receive the kind of acknowledgement and recognition that we're not used to, then it feels like this is uncomfortable for me. Like, and that's so unfair. That's so unfair. Like, and therapy is another thing that we talk a lot about on the show. I mean, I started seeing a therapist last year for another reason. I had been through a really toxic relationship. And I was like, I cannot be in this situation where I'm at in my life. I cannot be in here. So I went there for another reason, but I understand the value in being able to have an outside perspective to see the things that you normalized, the things that you in your mind was like, oh no, that's standard, that's regular. And then being like, no, that's actually not. There's a way to kind of to acknowledge what you've been through and to have the tools to recognize it when it's happening and create, have a different reaction to it. So I think therapy is amazing. And as you were saying it in terms of like identifying who you are with your career, which is another thing that happens in this business. Like, the whole idea of branding is such a huge concept that we're branded by our experience and what we're offering to the business, but that's not who we are. We're actually so much bigger than that. We have talents and we have skills and we have families and we have values, things that are beyond what we offer to any one corporation. So seeking therapy for having a little bit of a grounding and foundation of who you are and what you're actually bringing to the table outside of monetarily is so key and fundamental for growth. So thank you for saying that. I think we need to hear that. We definitely need to hear that.
Thank you.
So what are some common misconceptions that women of color face in the music industry?
I think there's a misconception that we are always in defense mode and somewhat of like a argumentative stance. And while I have found myself in those modes often, it's always been for a reason that made me feel like I had to assume that position. And this goes back to how we talked earlier, where it's like, essentially the way I'm being communicated to a lot of times is in a condescending way, or in a way in which, my authority isn't heeded to in some positions, or there is a defense of my authority. And those put you in the position to have to assert yourself with grace. Again, the misconception is I don't want to have to be like that. I want to be soft. I want to lay on a pillow and just be like, I love it. I love talking to you instead of having to, be in this. But I think that there is a lot of projection on Black women.
Oh, yeah.
In general. As a matter of fact, it's all projected. I'm cool as fuck. Like, sorry, I'm cool. Like, I'm not.
Fun here.
I'm chill. Like, I never want to have to be in meetings or in conversations where I gotta talk to you like this or like that. But, I have to assert that tone or that energy.
Yeah. No, and I think what helps us to kind of circumvent that is having more of us in the room that we can lean on for that kind of support, and that responsibility of us being the token and everything that we say and do is reflective on the whole is a bit unfair. And just so having more of us in the room to show we're not a monolith is going to help circumvent and help people to understand that we don't all think the same. We don't all go through the same challenges. I mean, we might share some of the same experiences, but everybody's story is different. And I think that'll help us to kind of stick up for ourselves and each other as well. How can women of color advocate for ourselves and each other in this competitive industry?
There's two parts to this, because I think the first part is not necessarily advocating for each other, but just like being there for each other and coaching each other through the game. No matter what, this plays the game. And there's so many of us that are like, all right, the game's not going to game me. I'm going to game the game. But you don't know the game until someone gives you the game, or until you are in the game and you're equipped with these different perspectives of how to communicate in certain ways and who to lean on for certain things. Like, it's all about your toolkit. And we come into this industry a lot. It's like, okay, I might have one mentor. I might have someone that's leading me, but like, your toolkit is essentially an evaluation of every different perspective and angle and part of this industry that you have an understanding on. Because I might be talking to someone on the creative team about something, but I don't really understand what goes into the creative of an artist rollout, because I don't have, relationships and or insight into that from someone looking out and saying, hey, when you're looking at artists this, that, and the third. Make sure you're looking at it from this angle, and that angle. So then when you're asked these questions, you're able to communicate it in a certain way that hits all these different angles. And you are then even more valued in what you understand because there's just all these different angles of it. The game is the game. And I have learned that you're no one smarter than the game. It's just all a game.
Yes. Oh, that was a gem.
I feel like I'm being so like dark about it, but like it is. That's realistic.
No, that was one of the realest responses I've got to that question. Like nobody really acknowledges that there's a whole process to it, that your expertise is different than the next person's. And if you have questions, don't be afraid to ask them because we are kind of pigeonholed into these silos in the business. And you only know what you're responsible for. So if you're on a project and you feel like you could expand in some kind of way to learn about it, ask the questions and get insight from the people that are actually doing those things. So, I think that was a major key that you just offered.
Thank you.
So I want to just thank you again for being on the show. I feel like I've learned a lot from your experience. I feel like our audience is going to be inspired to, use their voices and really show up for themselves in these spaces. So I want to just thank you again for being on the show. What can we expect from Drea in the future? What are you working on that excites you?
Well, when you said that, funny enough, I'm thinking about myself and not the company that I work for, but I don't know what to expect for myself in the future outside of just me expanding my network into the wave of like underground music coming out. But I will say that I'm most excited about some of the campaigns that I'm working closely on for SoundCloud. And one of them includes a station that we're curating for Pandora. Shout out to Pandora.
Okay.
And it is all around like the latest and hottest and newest wave of drill coming out of New York City. And this campaign, I selected the artist for the out of home and pretty much helped get that hit list together for who needs to be on that playlist and on that station. And it was kind of the first time I ever really got to like sit down and look at the landscape of like what's going on in a certain culture and figure out where to place different people and who to communicate with and who to make sure relationships are strong with, because we do so much in these places, but like we do a lot. And then we sometimes realize that there are other artists and other contexts and communities, or not communities, but managers within those communities of those kind of collectives. That's what I'm saying. Like establishing a relationship with at least everyone is kind of leads you into an open underground too. So I'm excited to really amplify those artists and be able to do the same for whatever comes in the next wave of drill or in the next wave of music just coming out of New York, regardless.
That is so awesome. And I'm excited to see what's in store for you in the future. And if there's anything I can do to support your mission, support your projects, please let me know. I am an open resource of information. I have a lot of connections and access to, girl. So we gotta, iron sharpens iron out here. I definitely want to help you move forward in whatever you need. So keep me posted. And where can people find you if they want to be connected to you?
Yes, you can find me at Instagram or on Instagram at Everything is Drea. Well, it used to be called Drea Vibes, and it was everythingisdrea.com. But that's not up now, y'all. It is EverythingIsDrea. Everything is Drea.
Love it. Well, I so appreciate you, Drea, for being here. And until next time.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much. This was a great conversation. And after the day I had today, this was perfect for me.
Also, I'm glad I can be a light for your light. Your light for your day is really what I meant to say.
No, it could be a light for my light. I'm a light. So look, be a light to this light. She was getting a little dim.
Dim. All right.
So much.
See you next time.
Remember, stay positive, inspired, and true to yourself. Go out there and kill it. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on Pub Royalty Queen Podcast.